Hey folks, so today I want to talk about stories and uh, three things to remember when things get difficult, when you need a dose of conviction. And building a company with a 50-year mindset, right? Um, I used to have that be at 100 years. Like, how do you build something that you hope will last at least, that you ensure will last at least for 100 years? But I brought it down to 50 years for the simple reason that unlikely I'm not going to be alive for 100 years. I do want this to stick around whilst I'm alive, right? And do the things that uh, I wanted to do for the people, right? Millions of people, hopefully billions. And I want to nail those foundational pieces wherein we're in the very early innings of building something epic and building something legendary, right? So, with that, let's start right into it. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about stories that we tell ourselves, and at the end of the day, like conviction, right? For example, we build in consumer products, both at LT and TechOviz, and this wouldn't be so true or true at all for B2B products, enterprise products, but for consumer products, there's usually some story. With TechOviz, I obviously talked about that story. With LT, I'll talk more about it. It's a much more personal set of reasons and all of that, right? And those reasons, they create that conviction. I want to talk about some of that, right? So I want to talk about what happens when you need to have a dose of conviction, right? Because things are going to be challenging, right? The greater the scope of what you're building, the more difficult things are going to be, right? In proportion. And so, what do you do when those inevitable difficulties arise, right? What do I, are the systems that I want to put in place, and what are the reminders and frameworks that I have in place that allow me to go on undaunted and keep on putting one step in front of another, right? So I want to touch upon that. It's also appropriate to talk about stories that we tell ourselves and stories that we tell others, because of the platform that we're building, right? That we hope to become the ultimate art. And art is all about stories. Art is not a storytelling platform for people's home spaces and enterprise spaces for that matter. I want to take a step back and talk about this because it's very easy to get daunted when you're building something huge or when you're undertaking a massive challenge. Um, and for me, for example, when I think about the scope of what we could be doing, right, I deeply internalize the responsibility that we have as a company, right? And again, also a part of me wants to build stuff that if I didn't build that, no one else would, right? It's very easy, like again, not to say anything about B2B products, but if you're not building a B2B agent, someone else will, right? But I want to build the kinds of products that if I didn't build them, right, they wouldn't exist in the world. They've got my own taste, my own, I wouldn't call it life experience, though obviously on some level that would be true. But these are like offshoots of me in a way, right? These products. And I don't want to make it about me. I just want to have something that is, unique in the world, right? That if I didn't exist, that thing wouldn't exist. It's like a piece of art, right? So it's like a piece of, it's like a book that you've written. If you hadn't written that book, like a sci-fi book, right? If you were a researcher, right, and you were, conducting research on alignment, for example, if you hadn't really done that, someone else might do it, right? But I'm very interested in doing the kinds of things that if you didn't do it, they wouldn't happen, right? That's a kind of products on some level. Not entirely, because again, if you try to do something that entirely that is a complete map of who you are, right? That would just appeal to you, right? You want to build something that is hopefully very universal, right? And again, that's the way we design the product, but um, that's that. I want to take a step back because it's very easy to get daunted, right? And lately I've been feeling this. There's obviously this palpable sense of excitement, but I've also been feeling this weight, this sense of heaviness, and um, this unease, right? Because we're not moving ahead at the speed that we want to be moving, right? Product issues and sales issues and all of that. And what I like to do is remind myself of the why and visualize what the product and the ecosystem and the company is going to be in, 1 year and 2 years and 3 years, in how many homes and how many enterprises, and think about the impact that's going to create for people, right? And use that to recharge the convictions. And you got to do that. You absolutely got to do that because no matter how strong your convictions are at the start, right, you absolutely got to recharge and you got to have that system in place. So I want to talk about that system. I want to talk about that framework. And again, you can apply that for your own goals and whatever goals that you've set, right? There are reasons that you started. So the framework I'm going to talk about, you can use this, repurpose this for whatever goals you have in life. As a first step, I want to think about what exactly are we building here, right? I could use a million words to describe this, but I want to focus on the higher level, right? Like we're building something that we hope is going to be a deeply intertwined part of people's lives, deeply embedded part of people's daily lives, rituals, routines, rhythms, right? People are going to interact with Visi, people are going to interact with the portal, with the platform, and glean these moments of beauty and joy and wonder and magic, right? And all of the good things that we want to bring to the world. And this is also going to be something that I'm going to work on for the rest of my life, right? Like this is a platform that even if there's competition, and there's always going to be like, I expect competition, like I'm paranoid about that, right? But again, I've got a unique vision that I want to bring to the world. And this particular thing, even if, let's say worst case scenario, we only capture 1% of the market, right? It's still going to be something I am going to work on for the rest of my life. Think about that, right? Just if you got something in your life that's gonna be a part of your life for the rest of your life, that's a really amazing position to be in, a really incredible position to be in, right? That's like a relationship. When I look at our roadmap, right, our product roadmap and company roadmap, and we'll talk about that some other time, I can't help but feel the kind of giddiness that is the harbinger of something epic, right? Just fills me up. But I can't even describe the cocktail of emotions I feel when I think about that. But that is not sufficient. At the end, you got to make contact with reality. You got to, have users interact with the next suite of products and features that you're building, and build on top of that, right? Like you can't build a billion, $10 billion company in your head. You gotta, and again, we'll get to all of that. So again, balance, right? Sure, conviction, having those plans, those strategies, those roadmaps, all of that's great, but also be extremely data driven and reality driven, right? Test driven development, kind of overlaid to startups in a way. The product roadmap itself is so exciting that, for the last many months, I have not been able to go to sleep until like 5 in the morning, right? Because I spent like 3 hours, 4 hours just in my bed on my phone, just typing out notes and stuff, right? Like, okay, what if we do this? What if we add this? What if we, this particular thing does this, right? Like, just endless things that we could be doing. Again, this is why we call it initially we used to call it the dynamic art and storytelling platform, just because of the sheer number of things that we can do and our users would be able to do on the platform, right? And thinking about all of the different things that DSPN, the end version of this, is going to be, right? It's going to be able to do. And the emotional states that it's going to seed in people's lives, right? When you think about that, when I think about that, it's so exciting. But again, you got to be grounded. You got to be grounded, because if you get way too excited and reality has a way of disappointing you, right? Like you can get way far ahead in your own mind, because you've been living in your own chamber. And you might forget that even if you got the best product, something completely revolutionary, the market still has certain laws, right? Now you can break certain laws if you got the reality bending will that Steve Jobs was famous for having, but you can't break them completely, right? You can just shift them. You can just move them around. And so you've got to be very cognizant of the fact and not burn yourself out because you set such audacious goals, such ambitious goals, that it's just impossible to meet them in the real world. And then you're like, the distance between the gap between your hopes and your results is so wide that you just, your conviction has no way of staying at the sufficient level, right? So you don't want to do that. That's a mistake that I made quite often. And so something I've been doing a lot more recently is using more conservative estimates, right? It's so funny that conservative estimates are so much better for, self-management, but also team management, sales team, technical team, all of that, right? And probably once I raise funding, investor management. always under promise and over deliver, right? Even for yourself. Like, sure, how those big, hairy, audacious goals, and probably shouldn't speak about them on in this conversation, but I do have those. But it's very important, it's very, very essential that you use your conservative estimates as your real estimates, right? And that way you're gonna get those. Yeah, the benefit of that, the biggest benefit of that is that you're also gonna get those, when you get those wins. And if the wins are going to be above the baseline of the conservative estimates, that's going to feel a lot better than if you got the same results but your expectations were much higher, right? So yeah, that's a pretty good balance and dance to think about in terms of the goals that you set. Doesn't mean that you don't, ambitious, right? Like long term, obviously be super ambitious. Even short term, be super ambitious, be super driven, super intense and obsessed and urgent, have that urgency, right? All of that is absolutely necessary, but again, be grounded in the facts, be grounded in the reality of how long things take, right? So that's super important. But even in the most conservative estimates, like we'll be adding, right, if our product, and boy, I mean, think about it, it just makes me so giddy. Uh, if you are able to, if you're half good at marketing, right, like quarter as good at marketing, and sales and all of that, right, like actually putting the product in hands of people, as we are with the product itself, even a tenth of the product, like we'll probably be selling 10,000, serving 10,000 users, or adding 10,000 more users every year. Users will be interacting with TechOS daily. People whose lives will be filled with so much more joy and wonder and beauty and meaning and delight and stories and memories, and we'll make the customer experience for our enterprise customers so much more memorable and delightful, and just something they're going to take home and remember. Fun moments, beautiful moments they're going to take home and remember for the rest of their lives, right? Moments of their interactions with you and all of that. And so when you think about that, right, that's just, again, so, so exciting. But beyond the actual project itself, and dare I say the compulsion to build something revolutionary, right? Something new and something absolutely novel, right? Just creating today I was thinking about this. I think actually I was on the road today, was looking around at these so many restaurants with these gleaming lights and everything. But the actual user experience of these guests, it's been the same for the longest time, right? And with AI and the dynamic art and storytelling platform, and the next suite of products that we'll be building, and features for that matter, just for this product, with like the scent diffuser and the camera and the mic and all of that, right? We're going to be able to create absolutely new, absolutely novel ways of customers being able to interact with restaurants, and being able to just, the restaurant journey will change radically, right? Actually, you need to make a note of this, so I'll just pause for a second. Yeah, so we're going to be at this forefront of this revolution of bringing these dynamic art and storytelling and visual and multi-sensory experiences to restaurants and hotels and retail spaces and wellness spaces and educational spaces and obviously home spaces and all of that, right? And and being able to see these emotional states that will be seeding for millions of people, that really inspires me, just beyond the product itself, the building the technology, building the user experience and all of that, right? And building the ultimate art and dynamic art and storytelling experience, right? There's just nothing quite like it, right? I just yeah. Yeah, yeah. So let's get back to the convictions, right? How do you recharge them when you're running low? And you're gonna be running low, believe me. It might not happen in 3 months, it might happen in 6 months, it might not happen in 6 months, it might happen in 12 months, right? But it is, no matter where you started, no matter how compelling your North Star vision is, your mission is, and all of that, right? For us, all of that's been nailed, and right for the longest time, I've been wanting to, for the last 12 years, actually, when I think about it, I've been going towards one direction, right? Like, I've never worked in a company, right? I've always done my own thing because I want to bring these things to the world. And so for me, like, when I became cognizant of the fact that there are things I'll be doing in the world, right? I mean, when you're a kid, obviously you realize that you want to do things like be an astronaut or stuff like that. Probably want to do something of that sort. I want to become a nuclear physicist. Um, but before that, I probably want to become. I'm not sure. I don't quite remember. I think it was something to do with. It definitely wasn't the founder. It wasn't really in the lexicon, at least in my. Um, it wasn't something I'd come across, right? Like the idea of being bring something new to the world. So I don't quite remember what it was, but from the longest time, I always had this instinct, this, I wouldn't call it streak. It's something much more foundational, the way I'm wired, right? Gonna bring something new to the world. I used to draw these places, right? Create these maps and ideas of, new world. Oh, I remember now. I want to be the architect of a new world. It's so funny. I hadn't really thought about that. I used to be obsessed with atlases and maps and stuff like that. I used to have these sketch pads where I just create these new worlds, right? And not because I want to create games and stuff, but I don't remember the subconscious reason why I was doing it. But I think it was because from a very young age, I had this compulsion of building new stuff, right? Bringing new things to the world. And so for me, what I'm doing right now is the most natural extension of my childhood self, right? So the yeah, and yes, I run out of conviction. I have my doubts, moments of doubts, days of doubts, right? And find it difficult all the time. So you gotta have systems in place. If you know that you're gonna grapple with something, you gotta build weapons, you gotta build defenses and defensive systems for that matter to be able to grapple with that thing better, right? Better and better and better, such that over time, you know, that whenever you interact with that, engage with that enemy, you're gonna come out chopped, come out on top, right? Come out trumps. So yeah, so my system for this, right? It's three core conviction rejuvenators, right? That's what I call them. The first one, the simplest of the lot, is remember your why. Why did you start, right? What did you want to change about the world? What did you want to bring to the world, right? What were the what was the world that you were imagining when you started, right? And for me, again, I've got a very clear idea of that world, a reasonably clear idea of that world, and my role in that world, and the company that I'm building, the role of that company in the world, and all of that, right? And having a pretty good picture of that, making that, I'm believing that stupid, the secret stuff, but I think there's value in making the reality of what you're building, right? Projecting the reality of that, right? Let's say that, you want to build something that you hope will serve a billion customers, a billion users in 5 years' time, right? I think there's value to kind of project yourself into that reality, into that timeline, right? And pull that to the present moment so you can kind of live in that, right? And use that to recharge your convictions. I think there is value in that, real value in that, right? I wouldn't want to, diminish it by calling it fake it till you make it, though it is a version of that. What you're doing is that you believe that, that world is inevitable if you do everything that you need to, and then you always have a really good, you have a more than a fair amount of luck on the way. But if you do the right things, right, if you walk on the right path, and if you execute with all of your blood, sweat, and tears, right, put your heart and your soul into it, it's inevitable. It is inevitable. So yeah, remember your why, remember your vision, remember your North Star, right? That's number one. Number two is project yourself into that future. What does the world look like, right? Feel it, make it really tangible. The first one was about the past. Why did you start, right? And the past could be about, well, not past in like a completely technically true sense, but past in the sense that there were experiences that you had that made you want to follow this particular path, right? But now, in the second one, you're looking forward to the future. That, okay, this is the future I want to build. So this future, what does this world look like, right? The world where your efforts have succeeded and your startup is, well, not startup anymore. Your company is impacting millions of people, and all the emotional states that you experience, and the pride, the deep sense of relief and satisfaction, and almost knocking on the doors of contentment, but never wanting to open them. Right? I personally never want to open those doors. Um, feel deeply about just how good it feels to be alive in that world, and feel good about the blood and the sweat and the tears all bearing fruit, right, to make that world come alive. And bending reality when you need to. Because that world is just so good, so worth it, and that all the sacrifices and the struggles and the suffering are worth it. Not just worth it, you embrace them because you wouldn't have had the one without the other, right? Also, put yourself in the mind of all of the people that your company is being able to serve, right? Or if you users, I wouldn't want to use the word users in this particular context, just people, humans that you've been able to serve, that you've been able to touch, and whose lives you've been able to impact positively. Uh, where you've been able to add these moments of not you, but again, the vehicle that you created, and the mission has been able to. Again, that's I use the word you. I use it very loosely. I mean, again, it's always got to be about the mission. It's always got to be about the vehicle, right? The instrument that you created. You're the conduit. I don't know if I should use this particular metaphor, but I guess I will. Right. So there are people who are religious who say that they're a conduit to do God's work, God's will. Right. And you can kind of think of it that way. That if you were fortunate to have those convictions to build something epic, then let it flow through you right into the world. But again, never, ever, ever make it about you. It's never about you. It's always about the mission. I personally don't feel like I need that, but I tell myself that nonetheless, because I don't want to be in a position where I need that, right? Where let's say we are doing really well, and it turns out that there was this impulse in me that hadn't really made itself known to me because I was never really in the world, right, where I had to grapple with that impulse. I'm talking of the impulse of seeking power or seeking fame or fortune, right? I just can't imagine me ever being that person. But also want to be humble enough to know that you don't know yourself entirely, right? At least me, right? Don't want to, presume anything on anyone else's part, but I barely scratch the surface of my own being, right? There are parts of me, dark parts of me, that might materialize in certain contexts where for which I need to be prepared, right? At some point in 20, 30 years, I'll become the perfect self that would never have to grapple with those unknown unknowns. But until I reach that point of perfection, enlightenment, nirvana, right, I need to be cognizant of the fact that anything could, I wouldn't say anything, right? There are things that I'm pretty aware that, there are things I just would never be tempted by, would never do no matter what, right? But there are things that I've got to be open to, just questioning myself. So recharge yourself by remembering, yes, remembering what it would feel like to serve these customers, right? And to infuse moments, tiny and massive, of joy and magic and beauty and wonder into their lives. We're already 24 minutes in and I haven't even been halfway through. This is going to be a long one. It's 2:30 in the night. Okay, still gonna go on. I've had a massive dinner today, so gotta go on. The third one, focus on the controllables, right? Once you determine that this is a path that you want to follow for the rest of your life, this path, these set of actions, they're your duty, right? No matter what happens out there in the world, stick to this path and walk on it unflinchingly, undaunted. Because nothing else matters than you being on this path, right? Like that's your highest duty, that's your highest calling, that's your highest self, the manifestation of your highest self. Then walking on the path in this very moment. Internalize this truth and you will find what you seek. Because what you're doing right now, walking on this path, is exactly what you seek, right, in this very moment. And where you will end up by walking on this path, one step after another, one brick after another, 5 years, 10 years down the line, it's exactly what you seek. And from this perspective, this conviction that you need becomes a necessity because the path is a necessity. And to walk on this path, you need that conviction. And because the path is a must have, you must conjure up the manufacture and will that conviction into being because you need it. Because your path, your duty requires it to be in your being, in your soul. Right? So that's the third one. I also have what I call the zeroth rule, which is expect the struggle and embrace it with the entirety of your being, with your heart and your soul. For suffering and impact are the yin and the yang of life. You can't have the one without the other. And the two will always be directly proportional. The greater the struggle, the greater the impact, and the greater the rewards. Well, rewards and impact tied together, right, depending on your own meaning of life. For me, I'm going to glean my greatest source of meaning as leaving a positive mark, massively positive mark on the world, right, when I leave. But forget about me leaving, even if I'm here, right, I still want to leave. I still want to create something that how can materially move the needle on how people live, right, how people connect and how people yeah, how people self-actualize, right, like in one sentence, in 3 words, that's the the highest encapsulation of the companies that the two companies I'm building, right? So if we can accomplish that, then we're golden. Also, as a meta point, expect the highest level of difficulties, right? And because the difficulty is always commensurate to the scale of the problem that you're tackling. And it wouldn't be you if you didn't do hard mode in life. If you don't choose a billion user product as the absolute least outcome in your personal definition of success, right? If you didn't choose to build new kinds of products and technologies and user experiences, think of yourself as fortunate to be able to do this work that you deem the most meaningful, the most aligned to your purpose in life, right? Well, it is your purpose. The difficulties are welcomed, even embraced, when you look at it as the yin and the yang. The path and the mission as the yin, the struggles and the suffering as the yang. Again, you can't have the one without the other. And even if you could, it wouldn't even be an iota as meaningful, as rewarding when all is said and done, right? So think of these difficulties and the struggles and the suffering as not just life, part of life, but something that you, something of like a friend, right? A friend is not the best descriptor of it, but something that you embrace because it's like the reason I use the word friend is I want to go for a feeling that's cozy, that's comfortable, that you expect to have in your life now and then. Now, it's this Danish have a word for it. It's hige or hygge, I think. But absolutely butchered the the pronunciation. It's Huga. Huga.
Huga.
Huga. It's a quality of coziness and comfortable conviviality that engenders a feeling of contentment or well-being. Right. What if your suffering can create that, engender that feeling in your being? Right. That's the state that you want to aspire to. It's the kind of state that the Buddha, for example, was able to inhabit. Now, even when his body was clamoring for food, when he had been on a 10-day fast or a 15-day fast, right? I'm now just making things up. I like to believe that to be true. And monks are, doing the things that they do, right? And they still feel this coziness. That's the state that you want to aspire to with suffering and struggle. Because this building is your practice towards your highest purpose. Another one, which is not as relevant, is I came across this interesting written article Only do it if you're crazy enough to do whatever it takes to solve a problem that you care deeply about, right? That's the only time that you build something, that you embark on this journey. And for me, obviously, that's true. I could not imagine. I think I've said this on this pod a couple of times, that I'd rather be have nothing and pursue the path that I'm pursuing. This is exactly where I am, right? I've literally got nothing, no clothes on my back, no home, nothing, and debt of £60,000, probably more at this point. £80,000, I think, is the current number. Oh, yeah, probably shouldn't think about that. Max out credit cards and all of that, right? Insane stuff. And yes, this is why you need the conviction, by the way. This is why you need the conviction. Only do it if you really deeply believe in that, right? And you're just so fired up that you just wouldn't be able to exist without that being true. And again, it might not be true for B2B companies and stuff like that, but again, for what we're doing, like I couldn't imagine it being any other way, right? Another framing that I'll come across that I absolutely love is the only way a startup fails is if the founder runs out of conviction, right? This is also true for life. What's true for startups is also true for life. Startups are the microcosm of life, right? A big microcosm for life, because startups are as big as life. They can be. Yeah, so Fred Wilson literally revealed the most important trait of a successful founder. The hardest part of building a company isn't the strategy of the technology, it's keeping your conviction when everything around you is telling you to doubt. Markets will turn against you, investors will get cold feet, competitors will come out of nowhere. Your own team will question whether you're on the right path, whether you're the right person for that matter. And in those moments, founders forget that doubt is a feature, not a bug. If the path were obvious, the opportunity wouldn't exist. The job of a founder is to hold the belief long enough for the big belief to become a reality. The only way you do that is by making the belief a reality in your mind when you started, right? And keep on nourishing that particular belief, that conviction. If you got that conviction and reasonable amounts of intelligence and strong execution discipline, the strategy and the technology and everything else will follow, inevitably. So that's that on the conviction side of things. I want to talk quickly of stories, right? Came across this really good one. Good tweet, was it a tweet? I'm not sure. Was it an article? Not sure. It's pretty long, but I'm gonna keep it short. Stories are a high-level language for programming people. Programming as a verb. Markets move on belief more than logic, and wealth is often created when enough people align their perception of value around a shared story. In a system governed by human attention, accuracy seems to be secondary to conviction. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The story doesn't always have to be true, it just has to be coherent enough to generate soft gravity, the kind that pulls in both capital and talent. Every major wealth creation event in the last decade began as a narrative loop. Bitcoin, Tesla, even FTX, before it imploded, was a masterclass in storycraft. The myth of an altruistic, autistic, okay, we can ignore that bit. Nowhere is this dynamic more obvious than in startup culture, where the narrative almost always precedes a fully formed idea. A startup is born twice, first as a story, then as a product, and the second rarely arrives without the first. The smartest founders often fail because they treat markets as puzzles to solve instead of stories to tell. They over-intellectualize what is fundamentally emotional. Most billion-dollar founders aren't the most technical, they're the ones who are really good at building self-reinforcing belief structures. Enough is this to say that perception replaces substance. Story and execution are codependent. Output creates substance. Narrative is what gives it form. Reality still demands timing, effort, and discipline. But narrative is what bends attention long enough for reality to confirm. In a world where anyone can create anything, leverage belongs to those who can make people believe. The goal isn't to deceive, the goal is to project the future with enough conviction that others help you build it. Whew, okay. pretty good stuff, right? When I've been going on for far longer than I would have wanted to, so I'll just talk about a couple more things, and we'll call it a day, call it a night for the time being. The first thing I'd say is, what does it mean to build something with the mindset of 50 years, right? Again, at the very least, I want this thing to exist for at least 50 years. What does that look like? You want to build the only way to do that is to build the very best, the ultimate manifestation of the product that you're building, the ecosystem that you're building, right? So in our case with DecoViz, it's about the ultimate art and dynamic art and storytelling platform, right? It's going to take a lot of different shapes. It's going to look obviously a lot different than it does today. We're going to keep on. The North Star vision is in the year 2075, in the year 2050. What is this in home spaces and enterprise spaces? What does this ultimate experience look like, right? How do we iteratively, what do we need to do today? What's the version of that we can do today, that we can build, launch tomorrow, and then tomorrow answer the same question and keep on doing that. And before you know it, you're 10 years down the line and you're on what the version should have been in the 10th year, right? So again, keep on walking the path, simple as that. Being the aspiring for and aiming for and putting everything to be the creme de la creme of what you're doing, right? No matter how much competition that you've got. Vitality, again, we've got the same thing. Our North Star vision is to build the ultimate matchmaking and social connection and relationship building platform, people connection platform, right? And we've got a pretty solid idea of how that looks like. So I think we're in a really good shape with that. Yeah. So that's a key part of the puzzle. Then beyond that, you want to build deep user relationships and deep user trust, right? You want to bring them along the journey. But again, the way you do that is through your mission, through your ethos, through your daily interactions with them, through your practices, right? All of that. And I don't like using the word brand in this particular context, but again, something that people really have a buy-in, right? Like they become your fans, they become your evangelists because of the value that you, again, not the best framing, because people, when I say value, people might think of monetary value, but when I say value over here, I mean the emotional value that DecoViz has been able to create and LNG has been able to create for them, right? If you're able to do that to the utmost, to the hills, you're going to love us, right? If you've got Wizzy and Lumi in your life doing the things that they're going to do, people are going to obviously obsess about us, right? That's what you aspire to. So that's going to be a key part of it. Then the other part is the basic part, right? Just staying up to date, staying ahead of the trends, right? If you're building something that you hope to sell to another company 5 years down the line, that's not as true. But if you want to stay at the cutting edge, if you want to be right at the top, then the only way to do that is to look at what's changing and being able to radically incorporate what's changing in a way that's obviously still aligned to your ethos and your mission and all of that, right? So that's a very crucial part of it. Ahead of the changes in the tech, in culture, in the broader world, all of that, and being able to adapt again, being able to incorporate all of that, the stuff that you need to into your what would have become a massive ship by then, right? Still operating. Jeff Bezos got this really good stuff, operating with a startup mentality. Now, they didn't really do that, they didn't need to, but I like that particular framing. Having like a David mentality, startup mentality. And then the last one is building with the mindset of serving your users for decades, right? Not with the path of an exit, that's not an option. IPO, I don't really believe in going public either for all sorts of reasons. No matter how lucrative an exit might be, you just don't give a damn about that, right? Because again, your singular mission is to bring that emotional value, those emotional states to the people, right? Millions of people, billions, hopefully. And that's what drives you. And also having the realization that even if you, let's say, did sell it, you'd still end up building this very thing, right? That's actually what really, the Zuck, for example, he said this, I think, like in an interview like 10, 15 years back, that even if he had sold Facebook to Yahoo for $1 billion, he'd be back doing social media, right? Social networks. So it made no sense to do that, sell it. And Yeah, just because you find this field, just the space of problems to be so much fun, right? So meaningful, so aligned. And for us, for example, especially for Tendency with the longer term vision of building new forms of artificial mind, I don't want to call them artificial minds, but yeah, let's just use that simpler term in this conversation, right? Building these human companions. I don't mean companions as in, like romantic companions. Like I'm talking of life companions that become our coaches and our guides and our sounding boards and our thought partners and our creator companions, the learning companions, and our all of that stuff, right? There's just so much, the intellectual challenge, the technical challenge, the product challenge, the neuroscience challenge, and all of that, right? It's just so exciting that this is exactly what I would be wanting to do for the rest of my life, at least for the next 20, 30 years. Um, yeah, and still would want to still be working on it even beyond that. But all in, like, I wouldn't say completely exclusively because I'm still gonna, have other things, but for the most part. Okay, so that's that. Do you want to touch upon anything else? Okay, the two more things. Another thing, this is kind of an aside, but you need to have the it's all on you mindset, all on you mentality, right? At this point, the DSP one is so good. I mean, just think about what makes me giddy is if you fail to get to the minimum number of views that I've got in my mind, right? 1,000 units by month 5 from today, 1,000 units a month by month 5. I mean, it'll constitute a massive failure on my part in terms of not being able to market it well enough, right? Not being able to, and I'm already failing on that front. Like when I look at the website content, for example, it's completely at odds with the current messaging and the positioning and the potential of the product, right? So obviously I need to fix that. But I'm just saying that there's things that I'm not really good at, right? And the product is good enough that it should have a lot more. It should have like hundreds of users right away, right? Like thousands of users in a couple of months. And if it doesn't, it's all on me. It's always on me, but this is amplified in this current context. Like you gotta have that mindset that if you're not able to get the results that you want, it's because of something that you're doing, right? It's not because the market doesn't want it. To put it another way, one conclusion that someone might reach, I might reach for that matter, is that, oh, you know what, DecoViz is, the world's not ready for DecoViz, or, DecoViz is a very niche product, or, there's a lot of education involved, I don't have funding, I don't plan to raise funding. I mean, I potentially could, but let's just say I might say something of that sort, right? None of those things are going to be true. The bottom line is that the world is ready if you can bring the world along, right? And that's your duty. I've been failing on that duty, obviously, but hope to intend to do a lot better. The product is good, right? The only way we don't get to the numbers that we've got, and we'll talk about some of those numbers in a second, is if I mess up, right? If I screw up our marketing, our messaging, and all of that, and it'll all be me. It won't be the product. It won't be the market. It won't be the product, which is sure it's an extension of me, but it's still not me, right? It's the way my execution is, and the way, yeah. So that's what I would say about that. I quickly want to talk about what do those numbers look like. What does success constitute? I will talk about the short term, medium term, and the long. Probably touch upon the long term. What does success mean for us at DecoViz, right? And in short to medium term, there are different levels, different ways I evaluate this, right? There's a personal definition, right? Because the product's so good, I'm also going to use it every single day. Up until now, we kind of been in building mode, so I can't really use it. But at some point, it's going to become a deeply intertwined part of my life. And the fact that this thing exists in the world, that we brought it to the world, me and the team, and we got like extreme worst case scenario, I don't know, let me throw a number out there, right? Like at a minimum, there are going to be like 1,000 people every year who get a DecoViz unit, right? And that's a minimum scale, right? Like that's a literal worst case scenario. If that were to be the case, there would still still feel good about it on some level, or would be solely disappointed, right? Considering the absolute potential of it, but that'd be like at least like the minimum level. That okay, you know what? It's at least bringing 1,000 true fans, right? Every year, if you add 1,000 true fans, which is like the bare minimum that this should be to end as a product, as an forget about the ecosystem, but just as a DSP one and two, right? Then I'd be like, okay, that's like the minimum level. I wouldn't constitute success on any by any stretch of the imagination, but it would be like the very extreme worst case scenario. And I want to quickly talk about this, right? I think as a founder, you want to have these worst case scenarios. They're really useful. I don't want to call myself a stoic. No, I like to follow many stoic practices. One of them being, let me find the term for that. So it's called premeditatio malorum, right? Premeditation of evils, so like the worst case. Right? It's the practice of visualizing negative outcomes to build resilience, to appreciate the present, and reduce fear of the unknown by mentally preparing for setbacks, losses, or hardships. That's sure that there's value in that particular part too, but it also helps you plan, right? Plan better. Like, you want to have an idea of what is the best case scenario look like, the 90th percentile scenario. You can't ever think of the 100th percentile. You don't want to think about that, right? That'd be crazy. At least I wouldn't want to think about the 100th percentile, because 100th percentile is literally every single person using it somehow, that magically. So that's I almost think of that as unrealistic, right? 90th percentile is like, if we are able to grow at the level that OpenAI has been able to grow, or Facebook has been able to grow, or some of these top companies, right? Like that'd be the 90th, 95th percentile success. It's not useful. It's not useful to think about at those extremes, because it's extremely unlikely. You obviously are aiming for those kinds of outcomes, that kind of value creation for people, but extremely, extremely unlikely. And it's not very useful to think about, even though you're obviously working, you're doing everything to kind of move towards that world. Not very useful to think about. So we put it in the 95th, 90th percentile scenario, just as a useful thing. But I'm gonna start with the worst case scenarios, right? Like we might have like a few thousand users by year 3, and adding 1,000 users every single year, right? Very niche product, but still selling is still become a deeply embedded part of some people's lives, right? So yeah, that'd be like the fifth percentile scenario, I'd say. But I'd say that's actually the worst percentile scenario. Like now, of every 100 outcomes, what's the worst outcome? That's like the worst outcome, right? And that's just without looking at adding other products down the pike that we're planning to add. Now then, there's the median scenario. Let's call it the 50th. That be the 50th percentile scenario. That's a more interesting one. You want to operate based on those assumptions, right? Like if you're able to really internalize market mechanics and all of that, right? And if half the things go to plan, half the things don't go to plan, if everything kind of evens out, you get some amount of good luck, some amount of bad luck, and all of that, right? What are the outcomes that you can expect? In that case, we're probably going to do like a few 5-figure unit sales per year, right? Like anything from 20,000 to 50,000 per year. And that'd be interesting, right? That obviously that's still a massive, significantly sized business, but that would mean that we haven't really done things that build something really exceptional, right? At the scale that we want to. It's still exceptional in its own right, but it's not at the scale that we wanted it to be. And then there's the long-term success, right? That's I'm not going to talk about this as like the 90th percentile scenario, or like the best case scenario, but just a long-term success. What does success constitute for us at Decovers, right? Yeah, the long-term success is more than 1 billion users, having a really strong content studio that releases sci-fi, culture-shaping movies, and also interactive and innovative AI-infused experiences, visual experiences, soundscapes, and all of that, right? And having these experience studios, physical locations, around the world in major cities: London, Tokyo, New York, LA, 10 cities I have in mind, probably go beyond that. And like, this is a key part: becoming the Apple. There's a part of me that doesn't like using the word, becoming the X for Y, but I think there's, value in using it, so I'll just say it. Becoming the Apple of home companion and enterprise companion tech. Right. If we can build the ultimate home companion tech and enterprise companion tech, that would be, that would constitute success like nothing else would. Right. Like, if we become the defining name, the defining tech, the defining product and ecosystem. Right. With the DSP2, well, DSP3, probably 5 by then, and then the home robot companions and enterprise robot companions and the other things that we are building, right? The living wall and all of that. That would be, yeah, that would be, that's what we're aiming for, right? That's what we're building towards. So I think that should be it for now. Thank you for the time. I'll catch you guys soon then. Take care.